Welcome to Project X Mystery. If President Donald Trump hates illegal immigrants, then today's story is about the killer who targeted them. Before we begin, support us by subscribing and liking the channel. Let's begin. A freight train rumbles through the dead of night, its iron wheels screeching as it snakes through forgotten towns and desolate landscapes. Most see these railways as lifelines, veins of steel connecting cities across America. But for some, these tracks carried something far darker, a ghostly predator, slipping through the shadows, striking without warning. His name was Ángel Maturino Reséndiz, a drifter, a phantom, a serial killer who used the very heart of America's infrastructure, the railroads, to hunt his victims. Over a span of 2 decades, he left a bloody trail across the United States, preying on the weak, the isolated, and the undocumented. His targets? The vulnerable, the ones society wouldn't miss. His method? A silent approach, a brutal kill, and a quick escape, always disappearing into the darkness. But who was Ángel Maturino Reséndiz before he became the railroad killer? Born in Piedras Negras, Mexico, in 1959, Reséndiz's childhood was filled with hardship and violence. He grew up in a broken, abusive home, frequently beaten by family members and exposed to crime from an early age. His mother later claimed he suffered serious head injuries as a child, an often cited trait among serial killers. By the time he was a teenager, he was already involved in petty theft and street fights, frequently running away from home. With no real stability, he learned to survive on his own. Sneaking across the US-Mexico border became second nature to him, and he spent most of his early life drifting back and forth between the two countries, committing minor crimes along the way. At first, he was just a thief, breaking into homes, stealing valuables, and hopping back onto the nearest train before anyone noticed. But at some point, something inside him changed. Stealing wasn't enough anymore. He discovered a new thrill, taking lives. His first known murder came in 1986, a homeless man, bludgeoned to death near the rail tracks. But it wouldn't be the last. Reséndiz had found the perfect cover. The railroads were his hunting ground, his escape route, and his home. Unlike other serial killers who had to carefully plan their movements, Reséndiz had the ultimate advantage. He was always in motion. He never stayed in one place for too long, never left a trace behind. By the time authorities found a body, he was already hundreds of miles away, riding another freight train to another unsuspecting town. But how did he evade capture for so long? Reséndiz was a master of blending in. He looked like any other homeless drifter, moving from place to place, sleeping in train yards, under bridges, or in abandoned buildings. He knew how to hide inside train cars, often slipping into empty cargo containers or riding underneath rail cars, where no one would think to check. This allowed him to cross state lines undetected, traveling from Texas to Florida, from Kentucky to California, killing along the way. His method was disturbingly simple and brutal. He would observe his victims for days, watching their routines, learning when they would be alone. Once he had picked his target, he would strike with whatever weapon was available, a rock, a metal pipe, or his bare hands. His victims had no connection to each other. Some were farmers, some were elderly, some were migrant workers. Others were random homeowners who simply lived too close to the railroad tracks. He didn't care who they were, only that they were vulnerable and easy to kill. Between 1997 and 1999, his killings became more frequent. In Kentucky, a pastor and his wife were brutally murdered in their home. In Texas, a schoolteacher was attacked while she slept, her skull shattered by a sledgehammer. In Illinois, a homeless drifter was beaten to death and left to rot in a ditch. In Florida, an elderly couple was found dead in their bedroom, bludgeoned with a tire iron. The police had no leads. The killings seemed random, disconnected, but they all shared one chilling detail. Each crime scene was near a railroad track. By the time law enforcement realized they had a serial killer on their hands, Reséndiz had already crossed into another state. The media dubbed him the railroad killer, and the fear spread like wildfire. Towns near train tracks began locking their doors at night. News stations warned people to stay away from train yards and rail stations. But Reséndiz didn't care. The thrill of the kill was too strong. He wasn't just killing to survive anymore. He was killing because he enjoyed it. In 1999, he made a fatal mistake. After murdering Noemi Dominguez, a schoolteacher, and Josephine Convica, an elderly woman in Texas. Authorities were closing in. The FBI added him to their most wanted list, and suddenly, Reséndiz was no longer a faceless drifter. He was America's most hunted man. His face was on the news. His name was everywhere, and he knew it was over. On July 13, 1999, in a shocking turn of events, Reséndiz turned himself in. He walked across the U.S.-Mexico border and surrendered to Texas Rangers. His reign of terror had finally come to an end, but his confessions revealed something even more terrifying. During interrogations, he showed no remorse. He claimed that he was chosen by God to cleanse the earth of evil people. Believing that his victims were sinners who deserved to die, he confessed to 23 murders. But investigators believe the real number could be much higher. In 2006, Ángel Maturino Reséndiz was executed by lethal injection. His final words? "I want to ask if it is in your heart to forgive me. You don't have to. I know I allowed the devil to rule my life." But for the families of his victims, forgiveness was never an option. The story of the railroad killer is one of terror, tragedy, and a system that allowed a predator to slip through the cracks again and again. For years, Ángel Maturino Reséndiz exploited the very thing that built America, its railroads, to unleash a wave of horror. And even today, some wonder, could another drifter be out there, riding the rails, waiting to strike? Because as long as the trains keep moving, the shadows will always hide something or someone. This was the terrifying story of the railroad killer. What do you think? Was his surrender an act of repentance or just another game? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more real-life mysteries and chilling true crime stories, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. This is Project X Mystery. Until next time, stay safe.